The second topic in this section on women and girls is family planning, which obviously has lots of controversies in many places because of religious implications and so on. But the data would suggest that when women are given free choice, they mostly select family planning options, as we will see. The ranking and results by 2050 of this as a part of the solution to climate and drawdown is number 7, way up there, and the reduction in CO2 expected from the family planning and the impact on population is estimated at 59.6 gigatons. And of course it's inappropriate to monetize a human right, which is considered the basic fundamental right, access to family planning and so on. This is an acute image of a 3-year-old Walid lying wrapped in blankets at his family's home in the southern Gaza Strip town of Rafah in 2016. Walid was recognized as the 2 millionth person born in Gaza, a tiny enclave squeezed between Egypt, Israel and the Mediterranean Sea. Gaza is just 7.5 miles across at its widest point and has one of the highest population densities in the world. Without getting into details on that situation, the statistic that I like, I'm going to pick several from Our World in Data, which I love, as I said before. The fertility rate, so children per women, when you look at average year of schooling of women in reproductive age. So as the average number of schooling goes up for the women in reproductive age, you can see that other than a couple of exceptions here where the education level remain rather low, the data suggests, this is in from 2017, that there is a systematic drop in number of children per woman. So that seems to be the strongest contraceptive in terms of just giving women access to education. In places like India, there is even evidence that vulnerability to natural hydroclimatic hazards actually decreases with education of a woman as well. She's much better able to digest the warnings from the meteorology departments and protect her family and so on. So this seems like a no-brainer. So doesn't even have to be controversial like family planning. Let women choose. Demand for family planning satisfied by modern methods as of 2017. So this is percentage of married women ages 15 to 49 years whose need for family planning is satisfied with modern methods. So you can see the numbers. They are pretty high in the rich countries like the US and some European countries. From a large part of the Europe there is no data, and also from Canada, but countries like India have been advocating contraception for many decades. They realized population as a problem way back in the 1960s and 70s and have been handing out free contraceptives, but those are to be worn by men. There are many detailed issues when woman is not educated, whether a contraceptive actually gets used by a man or not, and so on and so forth. Of course, everybody knows that US has got a long-running controversy on abortion, pro-life, and pro-choice and so on and so forth. Without getting into those details, the share of women using modern contraceptive methods in 2017, so this is the share of women who are practicing or whose sexual partners are practicing at least one modern method of contraception. So again, India has got a reasonably high number there, and then there are some other countries, Mexico. So as you can see, religion is not always a determinant of contraception allowed by the government or freely made available or used by the people, and so on and so forth. So educating women does matter even in that sense. Sorry about that, I don't know what happened here. Okay, so let me then try to put that in the context of what that means for climate change. So here is the good news. From the 1950s, there was a fairly high number of children per woman at 5, and then it started dropping and has dropped down to about less than 3 on average. Of course, some countries have much higher children per woman, but many countries from Japan to Germany, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and so on have even less than replacement number of children per woman, which is at 2.1. So that's not a good news, and there are some people saying the scenario could be that the population will start declining fairly soon. Looking at world population by level of fertility over time, if you split them into 1950 to 55, 75, 80, 2005 to 10, you can see the numbers changing. Let's say China and India. In the 50-55 period, they were up here in terms of about 6 or less than 6 number of children per woman. The total fertility rate, but if you go to 1975 to 80, there is already a significant drop, and by now 2005 to 10 we are in a very good range when it comes to India and China, and in fact many countries like China and Japan are beginning to have, you can see here, many countries are already below replacement level of 2.1, like Germany, Macau, Japan, Italy, Thailand, Canada. I'm surprised Thailand is here as well. Nonetheless, elderly care issues become a burden to the society, so many older people are left with no children to take care of them, so then the government has to do something about it. What is the connection to climate change? It's very normal to just link population to total CO2 emissions, but I find that this is not the complete story. So if we look at the total emissions from 1800 onwards, despite the 25 or so years of negotiations, the emissions continue to go up. So this is not good news at all. But if we look at per capita emission back in 2019, the latest data we have, you can see that the rich countries like US, Canada, Saudi Arabia, and Australia, and some of these countries up here have a fairly high per capita CO2 emission, whereas developing countries like India are down here less than 3 tons per person per year, and China is somewhere at 7.5 or 8 tons per person per year. So population is not the entire story. Of course, you also can think of cumulative CO2 emissions, which are high for the rich countries who have been industrialized and have been consuming most of the energy. You can look at that in terms of the share of global cumulative emissions. Obviously, parts of Europe and US and China end up at the high level, but we can forget the period before 1990 where we didn't know that CO2 was so damaging, but even after 1990 per capita emission remains very high for countries like the US and many European countries, and remains very low for a country like India. But even that is not a full story, because the rich top 5-10% of the Indians do consume high levels of energy and food and so on. So their carbon CO2 emissions are rather high, and this is of course the news that we have to keep an eye on, that as economies grow and per capita income goes up, per capita consumption will go up as well. So reduced population doesn't necessarily mean reduced consumption, because people with fewer kids end up consuming more per person. So we have to be always very keenly aware of this relation, that just reducing population is not the solution. Consumption per capita must come down. Okay, so in summary, increased adoption of reproductive health care and family planning is an essential component to achieve the United Nations 2015 medium global population projection of 9.7 billion people by 2050. As I said, some projections say that because of education of women and even a pandemic like COVID, which was argued to produce a baby boom, actually didn't produce a baby boom at all. So as long as women are in control, doesn't seem to be any Malthusian disaster coming. As Paul Ehrlich wrote in the 1970s, the population bomb didn't happen because Green Revolution fed the people. There was no large-scale starvation, and then educating women has been a good contraception overall. If investment in family planning, particularly in low-income countries, does not materialize, the world's population could come closer to the high projection, adding another 1 billion people to the planet. So that's 10.7 billion, almost 11 billion. We model the impact of this solution based on the difference in how much energy, building space, food, waste and transportation would be used in a world with little to no investment in family planning, compared to the one in which projection of 9.7 billion is realized. Okay, so the savings and cost are and the CO2 savings are based on that. The resulting emission reduction could be 123 gigatons of carbon dioxide, which is pretty massive, but one has to be very careful about how per capita emissions were accounted for in this calculation. At an average annual cost of $10.77 per user in low-income countries. But if low-income countries continue to grow in economic development and so on, then can the environmental footprint of growing economically be kept low? All the rich countries have grown rich by having massive environmental footprint. So how do you get poor countries to have high standard of living without increasing their environmental footprint? This is a challenge. It's not clear this calculation includes that. Because educating girls has an important impact on the use of family planning, we allocate 50% of the total potential emissions to reductions to each solution, family planning and girls education, so 59.6 gigatons apiece. Nonetheless, educating girls is a no-brainer. It's a no-regret solution. Having them join the workforce and be in politics, there are all kinds of indications that women are always more moderate influences on everything from war, conflicts, pandemic handling, population, family finances, family health, family education, etc., etc.